Recording in progress.
See the background of the sports.
Tell me when you're ready, Dr. Short.
We're ready to go.
Let's call this meeting to order. Let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for the cookies, Mr. Ritter.
Fastest pledge allegiance.
All right, Mr. Shaw, let's go.
All right. Well, I will say that I had to look. The last time we were in this room for a budget presentation was June 4th, 2019. It's been that long. It's hard to believe it's been that long, but it has been. So I have, I'll call it, the usual 54 slide presentation tonight. I promise you I'm not going through the entire 54 slide presentation. We're going to hit the most important slides in the presentation. But before I click past this beginning slide, and again, pointing out again, this is proposed final budget. This is actually the first full run of all the expenditures, all the revenues. I'm going to tell you that once we get to the slide, there's a very large deficit number, but that's typical for this time of year. We've seen those numbers being around several $1 million. So this is not any different from that, other than there's some extenuating circumstances, which we'll review as well with that. But again, proposed final being that is a PDE, Pennsylvania Department of Education designation. That's why we're not calling it a preliminary budget, because we passed our Act 1 not to exceed index resolution in lieu of officially preliminary budget. So proposed final, that meets the PD criteria as well. Gosh, I think I'm getting this. As well as the timelines that we have to meet with the Pennsylvania Department of Education in terms of passing a proposed final budget. That will happen on May 16th at 6 o'clock, again, at our regular board meeting. And again, that's just a step in the PD Act 1 timeline. Again, does not set the final budget, does not set the millage rate. It's just a hoop we have to jump through for that particular budget. And to show it as a document. As we do every year, we post that budget and we do a lot of work with it, as of which we still have a lot of work to do internally with it. We've already had several meetings, even this week, discussing certain aspects of it, and we have a lot more meetings coming up. We have a lot more information coming up in terms of looking at actual receipts and revenues for possible adjustments, as well as various expenditures, and coming up with some of our game plan with that. So just wanted to stress that what you're seeing tonight, a lot of it is work in progress, but there is a lot of work to be done. I don't want to kid anyone about that. There's a long way to go to try to get to the finish line, which the finish line is ideally a balanced budget with no tax increase, no fund balance. Now we'll see how far we get, how close we get to that point. Now again, as I said, now the other thing I want to mention with this presentation, again, I'm not going to go through all the slides. There is a lot of great information in this presentation. If you've never seen it before, if you've never had a chance to review these slides before from prior years, they're online, by all means, please go ahead and do that. Mike O'Brien will be posting it to the district's website this evening at the conclusion of this meeting. And by all means, please go through all the detail. Again, a lot of great information on there, and a lot of stories, in my opinion, are told. And being able to answer a lot of questions by looking at the slides. So with that, we're just going to jump right in. So again, some of our significant revenue expenditure issues. Looking at what issues we have, particularly some of our big issues. Item number one being our increase in priority real estate tax refunds, Monroeville Mall property. Those of you who have been around for a while, I've been mentioning about this every year, that this appeal has been ongoing, and based on the last update I received from Mr. Dice's office, calendar year 2022 is coming back to roost. And what does that mean? Looked at some of the various numbers that I was provided with. I calculated a number that's probably gonna be slightly increase of $2 million. I put a little extra in because, again, the number has not been finalized. Plus, unfortunately, we have another item that's going to affect this calculation for 3 years, is that STEB lawsuit that's going on in Allegheny County. That affects the value of the assessments. So I honestly expect the refund number to go up potentially as a result of that lawsuit. But again, we don't know how that's going to be settled, but I have enough that I feel built in to cover that. The other thing as far as with this refund is going to be paid from unassigned fund balance as indicated on the slide. That means is that is not going to have a negative effect on 22-23 expenditures, because as far as what the amount we're going to see out of balance, because again, we're going to be pulling from the fund balance for that. The one thing that it will have, unfortunately, have an effect on is our revenues moving forward, because based on the amount, the estimated, and I'll call it the middle of the road amount that I selected, we'll see on another slide, a $38 million decrease in assessed value. That comes to approximately, and particularly for this property, oops, sorry. Oh, there we go. There we go. $778,000. So that means that for 22-23, there's $778,000 that is lost moving forward of revenue. And the mall is our #1 real estate assessed and tax property in this district for that. So again, that's a significant hurdle to overcome moving forward. Now, as far as, and you'll see the total on another page here, the net amount that we're out currently, $4,814,000. But again, looking at items 3 through 8, which totals almost the same amount, $4.7 million. Looking at, again, not every expenditure line item, but the major categories of expenditures. And the #1 being increase employee salary expenditures of almost $2.3 million, which we'll see in the second part of the presentation, exactly where those numbers are coming from in terms of new positions, how they're funded, et cetera, with that. Again, there's a lot in that item, and also what flows from that item is also our PSER, Social Security, Medicare expenditures, almost $530,000. Health insurance related to that, $517,000. 8% increase is built in there. So those all feed off of the salary expenditures. Technology expenditures, $923,000. Increase in transportation contract and propane fuel expenditures, $274,000. We still have not locked in propane for next year. Based on the various conversations I've had with Feral Gas, many clients have not locked in. We're still hoping to get through the tail end of the winter heating months and to lock in hopefully this month, maybe next month, to see where we're at. The last price I had, just as an item point of discussion, $1.88 a gallon. I budgeted for $2 a gallon. So I'm hopeful to get somewhere around, I'd like to see maybe $1.75 ideally, but time will tell on that.
Just
What
for
do we
the,
currently pay?
$1.12.
yeah, and the low at one point was $1.05, right around there. So
Yeah, we
you
were
can see
almost
the
$1.
increases over.
One of the other things that we have to wait for that is that we're waiting to see if Congress is going to extend the credits that are able to come back for not only for district but for all entities who use alternative fuel like propane. So, for instance, we're hoping to be able to do that. So that'll net that cost down a little bit. Overall, I will say that we're definitely in a better position with propane than the districts that are with all the diesel fuel. That's looking to top almost $6 a gallon coming up.
Off the top of your head, what do you think that we're saving? Okay, we have $100,000 expenditure, but what would you need that?
You know what? Probably, oh my gosh,
Yes.
I'm going to say at least probably over $400,000 easy. And that's just taking maybe about 100 and some thousand times like $3. Now, as an example, the IU and their consortium for diesel, they're in the process of trying to get bids, which I want to say, in my opinion, I think they missed the window because I think we're just on an upward climb at this particular point in time for that. So it's a good thing that we're not tied into the diesel. The one thing I can say, even one of the early price points I had was about $1.75. So for us to still be only at $1.88 is pretty good.
Yeah, compared to
Yeah.
what's out there, correct, that.
Yeah, that's why, working with the vendor, I'm kind of hoping that it will get a little better. I've told the vendor that I do have authorization, if there's any kind of crazy dip in the commodity market, because that does happen, that we can lock in immediately for that. So we'll see what happens with that. But again, that's part of our increase, unfortunately. But again, I think this is a really good slide to really indicate the major areas of our budget deficit. You know, again, some feed directly off the salaries expenditures, some of which are out of our control based on contractual agreements that we have for that. So,
It's the air underneath.
and again, this is kind of related. I won't go into all the details, but just looking at our assessed value, last year when we set the current budget, it was the 2398. Now, as of the most recent point that I have from Allegheny County 2378. So it's decreased $20 million in assessed value. And again, a lot of that, and I believe it's on the next slide, I'm just going to jump to that, the calculation. It's because of a $38 million decrease. It's one of those things that's unfortunate because we've made great strides in the assessment appeals that have been taken by Mr. Dice's office. And with one transaction, it wipes out most of that.
What is the building, Aldi and the steakhouse and the bank? Any of that?
Eventually, those will be,
But not
not,
I don't
not-
know how that works.
yeah, it's, some of those are it takes a little while sometimes for some of those to come online in terms of that. But like, for instance, I mean, I kind of look at the overall assessed value for the district, kind of like the stock market. It's constantly going up and down, which is a little frustrating with it because, you know, I'll see some gains. Like, for instance, I saw some gains today for one particular property that went back to 2017. So we gained quite a bit there in assessed value. And then I'll turn around, the Bonnie will send me an email from the county, and there'll be a commercial property that'll decrease $600,000 for 2 years. So it's like, I would say 2 steps forward, 1 step back for it. But this adjustment that I've been required to make with the $38 million, losing $778,000, that's a killer. That really is. It's very unfortunate because that just adds to the current deficit. But it's one of those things we have to build it in there for it. Because if we don't build that in there and just ride it out and say it happens at the end of 2022, say even early 2023, we're counting on that money to be in the budget. And it's not there because it's going to be refunded for that. So unfortunately, that's something we have to deal with. But again, I picked a middle of the road valuation. Depending on what the STEB lawsuit is, that could increase. Hopefully not very much, but unfortunately time will tell. We won't know what the exact effect of that will be, but that's a pretty big issue that we have to deal with for next fiscal year.
Ask a question?
Yes.
Just a layman view that overall the housing prices are going up
Mhm.
and the mall price is going down. How does that score? Maybe we should build apartment complexes.
Well, I mean, we have some of those coming online. So, I mean, the main thing that we're seeing is, and one of the things with the great increase with the houses that are selling is that what Mr. Dice's office is takes a look at the selling price in relation to the listed price. And there's a criteria that they look at as far as what properties to take for the appeals for that. And a lot of those we are successful on, so it does increase the assessed value. That, in my opinion, is the best way of doing it. The one thing we don't want to see is another county-wide reassessment. We've had 2 of those. They're an absolute disaster. I have other slides built in here. I'm not going to get a whole lot of detail with those tonight, but if you look at the one slide I have, the most recent one, when it was Judge Weddick, there was the lawsuit before them, and he determined on his own to require that. The problem was that the values, once they were assigned by the county, there's a period of time for them to kind of settle out, kind of let the dust settle a little bit. He required us to utilize those values, in my opinion, probably about a year sooner than we should have. So, I mean, they just dropped off. So I was even trying to build in adjustments, and I wasn't even close. Because one of the problems I had was that I did not have any other numbers to go off of from the one back in 2001. I just didn't have those numbers utilized. Now I have numbers, so unfortunately, if we have to go through this again, I can look back for that, because even at the time, we were being told, whatever you do, whatever adjustments you make with your millage rate and or other adjustments, you better be able to defend it in court and have a rationale to defend all your numbers, which I did based on that. But again, now I have something to compare it to. I hope I never have to compare it again. That was just a disaster, again, in my opinion, for that.
To answer your question, Dr. Singh, that mall once upon a time was filled with bigger name stores,
Yeah.
more of them, more foot traffic, much bigger revenue potential. So what we're seeing is the consequence of a mall that's just not very healthy. And if you take a walk through it, even if you weren't here 20 or 30 years ago, you'll see exactly what it's reflected here.
One of the things we saw a couple years ago was that, again, a lot of the stores that moved out of the mall moved into the Miracle Mile. Miracle Mile is booming. We did take an appeal on that, a very successful appeal. Unfortunately, at the time, what we saw, we lost value last time on the mall, but we gained it on the Miracle Mile. So it was almost a wash.
Even with the expansion across the street.
Yes.
So it's a unique situation with the mall, then the Miracle Mile back and forth.
But again, you know, this is a killer. I mean, it really is. I mean, when you look at the new plaza that they're building on off of 22, you look at the apartment complex that you can see from the Parkway that they built back in there. You look at the old airport with the homes going in there. There's supposed to be a new home plan going behind Target as well. I mean, those are all great, but just this calculation alone wipes that out. The one thing that I'm fearful of is that this mall, it's in bankruptcy. CBL's in bankruptcy. And that hasn't been resolved yet, to the best of my knowledge. I haven't heard anything on that. So you have this appeal, and you just keep your fingers crossed we don't have another subsequent appeal that maybe they're closing it. So what would happen then, and this being a commercial property, you still have a land and building value, but with commercial property, what really brings the value up is the lease rental payments that they collect.
And Paul, have we heard about the new building, apparently a VA hospital? They're building outside of
They're building
Macy's.
outside. That's probably going to be tax exempt, my guess.
Tax exempt?
Tax exempt. I expect that to go tax exempt. Similar to the
But
hospitals.
I was thinking they may have been renting that property.
Yeah. It's a shame with that. I remember, it's been a few years, but I remember one time when there was a valuation out for UPMC. I did a calculation on that at the time, and I want to say it was $1.6 million of revenue we do not collect because it's tax exempt, nonprofit.
So let me know that UPMC employees and those employees in Allegheny County, they have the highest rate of their employees on welfare in the county.
I know, it's a shame.
So will it help with I think you might have mentioned, with the new buildings that are coming in on 22?
All those will help, definitely. Those will
That's
definitely
hopefully
help.
offset some of the losses.
That's what
They've
we
been backfilling that area, it seems like, for 10
forever,
years.
I know.
But I noticed a Key Bank and some other storefronts.
And then the steakhouse is going to.
Which one?
Pittsburgh is forever attempting to get the nonprofits to contribute.
Oh, longer, yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Has
Tom
Monroeville
Gonzalez
and or
moving over there when
Gateway
they'll
done that?
finish.
And or Allegheny help?
I'm not aware of them being formally approached in that manner for that,
Well,
but
they will.
yeah.
At least we have to knock on their door and ask them. Of course, they can do is say, no, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but every bit helps.
Yeah, it never hurts to ask, but again, when you just look at those two properties by themselves with their value, that's a lot of money that we could, if those were true for-profit entities and paying what they should be paying for that.
Can I ask you a question from the teasers on the first slide?
Mhm. Yeah,
I could be totally wrong, but was there a point where Gateway didn't pay teasers for a couple of years and now we're paying them back?
well,
I don't know that.
What-
I'm wrong.
yeah, no, you're correct. There was actually 1 year, I believe it was actually zero. What had happened was that they decided to lower the rate. down because at the time the fund was doing, it was successful. What they should have done was maintain a flat line, be consistent, and build it up. So the problem, what started happening was that there were changes in the market, and what was being fed in and what was being paid out, it got upside down with it. So then we were on the roller coaster ride, and there's other slides I have that they'll show some of the rates with that as well.
And questionable investing as well.
Yeah, it's a shame with that because they should have kept it a consistent percentage, and honestly, if they would have done that, it would have been fully funded. That's how it should be, but they elected not to do that. So then so one of the things, and we'll see some of the rates on there, but the district does receive 50% back of what we pay for that, for not only for PCERS, but Social Security and Medicare for that. But yeah, that was a bad decision on their part to do that. Let's see here. Yeah, you're welcome. So right now, I'm even going to skip to, let's get to the bottom line. So right now, we're showing an increase of revenues at $691,000, increase of expenditures of $5.5 million. So a shortfall or deficit of $4.8 million. Now, this is before utilization of a recommended tax increase and utilization of additional portions of fund balance. Now, additional portions, I had the $2.5 million was listed there. I also have another $500,000 built in for any Gateway Middle School related increases, because again, with our $1.8 million change order, out of our $45 million pie, we've utilized a lot of those funds. There's not much left in there. But I had to build in monies. We may not even touch that $500,000 for this year, but I have to build in money so we don't overspend our budget. That's the reason why that's building. There's a good chance you'll probably see that same amount built in for 23-24 as well. Likewise with the $2.5 million, I have, in addition to taking the revenues down, I have to build in the expenditure. We don't want to overspend our budget, particularly when we know something's coming for that.
And Paul, we do not have any idea as far as when the Monroeville Law assessment appeal would be finalized or bankruptcy at this point.
I was told, based on correspondence from Mr. Dice's office, calendar year 2022, that it will be an issue for us. So now, as of finishing out this fiscal year, as of right now, unless I get a letter or something tomorrow from them, we may or may not, this current fiscal year may or may not be affected by that. It appears that it's going to be a next fiscal year for that. Again, based on the correspondence. Again, unless something changes on it, but that's what we're anticipating at this particular point.
So going into bankruptcy, what's the overall effect?
Well,
the overall.
They are currently in bankruptcy now.
Oh, okay.
Now, this assessment appeal is kind of on top of that.
Oh, okay.
So one of the things that was explained to me in some of my email correspondence was that they are close to settling the actual numbers of the appeal with the owner, but the bankruptcy court still has to approve what's been agreed to for that. So there's another layer of, which I can't see that them saying no to that, because that's just more money going back to the owner that they would have cash funds to distribute potentially as part of the bankruptcy for that. So it's good for all the creditors involved associated with CBL for that. But so this is where it's at gross. Now, the one thing I will note, and this is something typically what we do, so as I mentioned before, the proposed final budget, again with our required documents, it will actually show a tax increase in there, and it will be balanced with a portion of the fund balance. Again, that's just because I have to show that document is balanced with that. That does not mean, and you'll see in the resolution that I have for the month of May, it's not setting the millage rate, it's not setting the final balance budget for that by any means. But again, that's typically how we handle it this time of year with that, to do the proposed final budget.
Paul, could you give us a little review of tax increases the board has implemented over the last few years?
I have a slide coming up. We can take a look at that.
Well, I was hoping you would.
I do. I'll tell you what.
You want to jump ahead to where we're 14th lowest, and
you know what? Let me see here. Like I said, there's a lot of great slides in here. I'm not going to go through charter school reform.
We got time. I'm not rushing the.
Back to cyber.
That's fine. I'm not kidding.
I want to see your cyber tuition.
No, I'll tell you what, let's do
So
this.
back up to where you were.
That's all right.
Go back to cyber tuition you had, I saw that.
Yeah,
What did you see about? I can't hear.
Something with cyber tuition I saw.
All right, I didn't see that.
we'll go
I'm
back.
not optimistic. Jumped off the screen.
Yeah, you know what, that's actually, that's not gonna happen.
How long did it take you to do these slides? I just had to do 54 of them, and I think it took me 2 weeks.
It's a lot. I have to admit, I've used this I think it's a great presentation, and I've updated so many times that actually, it's easy for me to update, but this is exactly the slide. So this is going back through my time at the district that I've been able to track this information. And so what you're looking at is
There you go. Tax
years
increase.
with their
Yes or
tax
no?
increases, what the amount was of the tax increase, and utilization of fund balance. Now, again, some of this utilization of fund balance was utilized to balance the budget. Some of it has been utilized for capital projects transfers for that over the years. Some of the amounts are, for instance, I believe some of these increases were utilizing referendum exceptions. This one in particular I know for sure was. But when you look at some of these increases, again, these are index rate numbers for that.
It's a year.
So
What are you talking about?
one of the things, and again, for some of our new folks, we're under Act 1.
19.
Prior to Act 1, if you had to, say, raise your millage by 3 mils, you could do that. But in Act 1, you can't do that. The legislature limited all school districts' ability to raise taxes. So you're limited to an index.
Some districts would hold off 3,
Yeah, some
4, 5
districts
years,
hold off,
and
and
then boom.
you can never catch up.
Yeah.
It's impossible to catch up. Unfortunately, that's the system that we have for it. But no, in the past, if you needed, like I said, 3 mils, you could take it. But now, we'll see on the one slide, we're limited 4.1%. I'm trying to think about, I might have to go back for it. Yep, 4.1%. So what does that equal? 0.8565 mils.
So I'll just make the brief announcement that I'm sure everyone on the board agrees with, which is we all recognize inflation is killing people in their day-to-day ability to live. So no one is contemplating a tax increase in any kind of cavalier or method or manner that would suggest we're not aware of that.
Yeah, unfortunately, with some of the things we have going on, I mean, that definitely, all the pricing that we're seeing, everything is going up. I mean, across the board, everything, even our bid pricing, everything. As I said, propane. I prepared some other resolutions for May. There was our water testing as an example. I think that went up almost 10%. So it's across the board. Everything's going up. Everyone's costs are increasing for services. The products that they utilize in their services, they're passing it on to everyone. So again, we're not alone in that. We're not the only school district. Even individually, we see what we're paying. It's astronomical compared to what we were paying even a year ago.
The 4th lowest ranking in Allegheny County, in Pennsylvania, in the country.
In Allegheny County, yeah. Actually, there's a prior slide. Like I said, I jump back here. There we go. So again, we are currently 21-22, the 14th lowest millage rate out of 42 school districts in Allegheny County. And again, I showed the lowest, highest, where we are.
You have a slide with neighboring areas.
Our immediate neighbors. Just to get an idea, I indicate who raised for the current year to the districts raised. We don't know what they're going to do for next year. For that, again, that's kind
We know what Penn Hills is going to do for next year.
Penn Hills is going to be raising. I would think that's a pretty good bet for that. Let's see. Now I want to go back if I could.
You have some lower than us?
Oh yeah, there's. As a matter of fact, I think I have a little.
We're 14th, so I was wondering.
So this is just, I have some different districts on here. So at the lowest, Duquesne City, 17.5, Brentwood Borough, the highest, and then have us indicate, and a few other ones in there as well, some of our neighboring ones and some other ones that aren't our neighboring ones, just to give a little bit of a flavor for some of the millage rates that are currently out there for that.
But on the millage rates, are they based on the economic makeup of where the school district is?
Assessed value. Yep, assessed value, yeah. As far as like other factors like earned income and other taxes, those aren't incorporated into this straight value of land and property.
And this
That's
is
what the
just-
mills, she's saying, that's what
Yeah.
it's based on.
Exactly.
Straight value of property.
Assessed value, correct. Antiquated system, but unfortunately, that's what we have. I want to say, I saw a slide somewhere. I think we're still 44.
I thought it was lower.
The state out of 50, it's
46, I thought.
is it 46? Well, see what they did, they bumped it up, I think, 2 spots, because what the state did about 2 years ago, they decided to show more revenue in their basic ed, so they moved the reimbursement for Social Security and Medicare into that number to pump up their number to say, look what we did, we increased it. No, you really didn't. You just moved it. But it honestly, it brought them up, I think, 2 places in the ranking.
For state funding for
it's-
public education.
It's just a shell game on
Yeah,
their part.
Pennsylvania.
Well, that's one of the other things is, and I'll go back, I want to just point out some stuff on some state funding, is that, sometimes you'll hear, well, we gave X number of dollars to education this year. Well, yeah, but a lot of that was your reimbursement of PSERS, Social Security, Medicare. You're required to do that. You didn't just do that to do it, for that part. And then I want to get back to that slide. I just want to hit a couple items on there. So here we go. And again, I'm talking about, and again, I won't go, basic education funding, special education funding. So those 2 amounts indicated there is what Governor Wolf proposed. That would be what our piece of the pie would be of his total amount. Now, $1.9 million is almost the equivalent of our full index tax increase. Now, realistically, we're not going to get that. He had proposed a large increase last year, and we got a little bit of an increase. And actually, I have to admit, I was very surprised because I wasn't anticipating an increase with all the federal stimulus money. I thought maybe they might take a pass on increasing it at all. They actually did. Now, so knowing that, I do anticipate some bit of an increase, and I've calculated in it's about $308,000. But again, I don't think it's going to be, definitely not the 2.3 million for both line items. Now, the one thing I'd like to see, again, this is one of those things every year, unfortunately. I'd love to see the state get their budget settled prior to ours, so we could actually have 2 official numbers to put in there. Maybe we could gain a couple $100,000. I still have to look at this. I still might do some tweaking in these 2 line items for that. We'll see. Time will tell. That's one of the things I'll be looking at here in the next 2 months or a month and a half till we get to that point of a final budget. But again, it would be nice if the state could say, yes, this is what we're going to give you. We get the calculations from Pennsylvania Department of Education, and we can drop those numbers right in our budget. One of the things that we saw, and this is a nice lead into my other slides, again, I mentioned about the federal stimulus monies. So we have 2 pools of money, that we are going to be utilizing, some of it this year, but also some of it for next year, and a piece of it even into 23-24, and that is our ESSER 3 funds. As soon as I find that slide. Which again, ESSER 3 is our largest form of federal funds.
It's right.
So ESSER 3 and ARP ESSER state set-aside funds. Now, the state set-aside funds, and we'll see some detail in the next slide or 2, those monies came out in July. We didn't even know we were getting those monies. They're not even in this year's budget as far as the revenues being budgeted for. Now, we started to incur expenditures for our after-school programs for that, and some of the other pieces of the learning loss that we have, varsity tutors, some of the other aspects of that. But again, we didn't even know that was happening, which is a little frustrating. I mean, again, it would have been offsetting, but at least it would have been nice to know that they were contemplating that.
That's the rain.
Big storm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Probably wonder if I
There was actually
Yeah.
a tornado warning I saw pop over.
Yeah, until like 9 p.m.
So again, this is just a little bit of a refresher. We actually had this on in March as far as the ARP ESSER state set-aside funds, 7% allocation. These are the funds that I referenced that we received. We did not know about that we were going to receive these. Those are the various breakdowns of those funds. The after-school tutoring, we'll see how that pans out when we reconcile it. I'm predicting probably most of that $66,000 will be gone. Summer enrichment will start this summer, so we will start tapping into that $66,000. Some of the learning loss, we've already started to expend some of those funds, but there will be carryover. I think I have about $251,000 of that carrying over into next year's budget. So again, wanted to just highlight that. As well, again, our ESSER 3, which with that piece of the monies, we've started to expend for 9 staff members, which we'll see in the next presentation, as part of the learning loss piece. And then we also have the largest piece of that, which is our HVAC upgrades for Evergreen and UP, the $4.4 million for that. But again, these are our 2, as we know right now, line items of federal stimulus money for next year. We actually had another revenue stream of IDEA ARP ESSER funds that, again, we didn't even find out till almost the end of December that we were receiving almost $200,000. So luckily, we had created 3 new special education positions. We were able to offset those salaries, and also it was going to pay for some professional development that Mrs. Bungard was able to acquire for staff. But I inquired with the IU. I said, any chance that we'll have those monies for next year? And they said, very doubtful. So again, as we'll see in the next presentation, so there's 3 new positions that will not have any offsetting revenue to pay for them. And that's kind of some of our issues with where we're at with our deficit and our $2.3 million increase in salaries and wages. Okay, so again, wanted to hit that. Again, I'm not going to go through all these slides on the revenues, the charter schools. Please go back, take a look at those. Certain things are going to happen, certain things aren't going to happen. But again, some great slides, visually depictions of what the top 10 revenues are, expenditures as well. You know, what are the top 10, visually seeing exactly how much they make up. Again, what we're going to see in the next slide, and I think it's actually even a slide after this, our largest area, again, employee wages and salaries, then our various benefits as we see there. But again, it's 64% of the total 22-23 budget, wages, salaries, and related benefits, 64%. Again, you know, we are education, we are very labor heavy, very labor dependent on what we do to educate the kids. And again, just as I stated before, we have a lot of work to do, a lot of things to review like we always do. A lot of red ink will be utilized as we always do as well. And the other thing I want to highlight is the gaming revenues. Again, this is, I think I mentioned this before, just to show kind of where assessed values were in the last reassessment, 2.5, and here's where we are here. A lot of decrease in that number. So everyone did hear that there were extra gaming monies received, record-breaking gaming monies received. Luckily, and very surprisingly, the state actually passed on some of those monies to the districts. That was always the original intent of state gaming, was to get rid of property taxes, is to forward those funds. So I was very surprised when they released the information on Monday of this week that, and I have to apologize when if Micah and I were talking about this slide. This slide normally, and why it's so flat, is that these are very big numbers and they only varied from only $1,000 to $2,000 each year. So when I threw in the $1.8 million number, it almost made it go flat across. But again, we're seeing about $381,000 of extra gaming money. Now, this is not a windfall for the district. This is merely an offset. We receive the funds. We give the funds out to all the qualified taxpayers with qualified homesteads. The same amount of money is split up amongst them. So everyone, and I have another slide for that. So again, that's my initial estimated number. I have a file from the county that I have to go through and break down. I'm projecting that this number will probably increase by about 23 cents, but overall, compared to the current year, this number is up about $50.
So gaming is just the casinos, or is it the lottery, and what is
It's
gaming?
mostly the gaming, the online revenues. Some of the lottery that was already in place goes to rent rebate and some other programs the state already had in place. But, we all heard on the news that they had collected record numbers from the casinos in the last couple of months. So again, they're passing that on. Now, my opinion, I think they're passing that on because they're still flush with a lot of federal stimulus funds at the state level. They're still trying to figure out what to do with that. I think one plan the governor had was to distribute $2,000.
So everybody can pay under 50,000.
Yeah, so they're trying to figure out what they're doing with those funds. What they're ultimately going to do with it, we'll have to wait and see. But they have so much. And, maybe the governor was thinking, I think it's $1.5 billion he was proposing for basic education funding, maybe taking some of that from there. See, the problem is that if you take those funds and try to plug it into a line item, trying to maintain it for the subsequent year or years is impossible. Where are you going to come up with extra revenues to continue to offset that? Because traditionally, particularly with basic education funding, the amounts we receive, we always receive those same amounts. They always at least stay the same, hold harmless, and they may start to increase slightly or a little bit more than that. They never decrease. We've never seen a decrease with that. So again, they're cautious in terms of how much is put into basic education funding in terms of their funding formula. We've heard some things about the funding formula. I'm not even going to even try to touch that this evening. We could spend a whole evening just talking about the components that go into that.
So are you saying any money that we receive from the money that they currently have would kind of have to go to a project versus a long-term improvement?
Well, in terms of this federal stimulus they have, they're under the same constraints that we are. That we have that we must comply with as far as how we can spend those. So, all right. Now again, this presentation will be up. I'm just going to skip to the last slide just to let everyone know what's next in the process. Is that we will meet again June 7th for a final public hearing for the budget. And again, we will do the same as what we're doing this evening. We will be live. We will be also via Zoom. With that, we're going to switch over to our staffing portion of this evening. I think Micah is going to do that right now. And I will do the honors of advancing the slides as we go through that. Who's doing the honors?
I am.
Oh, okay. Take it away,
Thank
Tricia.
you,
Just let
Mr.
me know
Scott.
when you want me to advance the slides. I'll be more than happy to do that for you.
I will, thank you. As Mr. Schott stated, 64% of the district budget is attributed to personnel. Our employees are essential and a valuable resource, and they're our most valuable assets. This week is National Teacher Appreciation Week, and as today is National Teacher Appreciation Day, it seems most appropriate as we discuss staffing for the upcoming year that we recognize all of our dedicated educators along with our support staff because they each play such a critical role in educating and shaping our children and the communities. We're going to start with recapping what we did in 21-22 school year. Last year we presented and budgeted for 6.5 additional positions. And as we recognize the impact that COVID had on learning loss, the district committed additional resources to mitigate that learning loss. So we added 16 positions over what we originally budgeted from last year, 8.5 of which, or 9 of them were funded from ESSERS, and 8 of them were taken from other resources. So this year, as you look in the slide, we are requesting to retain 9 of those positions from last year to assist us in mitigating the learning loss and classroom size reduction. 9 of those positions will be funded by ESSERS. And in addition to that, we're recommending proposing 10.5 additional positions to the district. On this slide, as you look at it, ESSER 20, the first column shows what was offset in 21-22 that was done by ESSER's money. The second column depicts the new positions that we want to assign to ESSERS for 22-23. And off to the right are the additional positions that we are requesting, which equates to another 10.5 positions, which equates to 1.9 million. Out of that, there are 2 assistant principals. We're requesting an additional grade 1 in CSE and Ramsey due to class size reduction. Grade 2 and grade 4 in University Park and Evergreen for the same reasons, class size reductions. The elementary is requesting a 0.5 music teacher. The high school is asking for an additional art and half facts. They are also requesting a high school PE teacher, a social studies teacher, and an additional special ed teacher. If you go to the next slide, it will show our enrollment projections for this year. For kindergarten, as you can see right now, we're staying the course. We're projecting 3 kindergarten teachers for each building. We do not know what the enrollment is right now, but typically we have maintained for the last several years 3 teachers across the board. If you go to the next slide for grade 1, again, due to the class size reduction, we're requesting an additional teacher at CSC, which shows the class size with that 4th teacher of 22.75, and an additional teacher at Ramsey, giving that class size 18.5. The next slide shows grade 2. For that, we're requesting an additional 4th grade in University Park. And that shows the class size with that addition brings it down to 19. For the 3rd grade, it's staying the same. We're recommending no choices, or no changes. All of that will remain the same as we currently have this year. For grade 4, it is also remaining the same. 3 classroom sizes across the board. For Mosside Middle School, that is what their projected classes are. Now, as far as what we have contractual, that will not make a change. However, they are requesting some of the additional supports that we had in place from last year. And finally, we are requesting an addition of a speech therapist and a staff nurse. Any questions?
Is that staff nurse full-time, or what, how many hours would that be?
We would like the staff nurses to be full-time because of the scheduling problems that we have when they're part-time.
Okay.
Comments or questions?
How many staff nurses do we have now, Ms. Crum?
We currently have 1 per each building. However, we do have some that are part-time. So that's where we have a part-time school nurse and 2 part-time staff nurses.
And what about speech therapists? How are we staffed right now?
I will let Mrs. Bungard, if she can talk, answer that question.
Hello. I apologize. We currently have 5.
I'm very concerned about Ms. Dunbar.
Is she driving?
I don't know. She just doesn't sound well.
No.
I apologize. I have a sinus infection.
Oh, well, you know what? Someone else can answer the question, right?
What was the question?
It was a bad question. Forget
We
the
have
question.
5 speech therapists, and we are recommending, based on what has been come across right now for recommendations, adding an additional 1.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
I had one question too. When you were on the slides where you were adding an additional teacher at University Park to bring their totals, their class size down to like 19, whereas still some of the others are 23. You know, how is that determined? What?
Basically, if you take the number and you divided it out by 3, the class size then is so much higher than the rest. It's one of those, it's kind of, you don't want to say it's a game, but you're tilting the slides to see if we cut it too short, the classes are too big. And sometimes you have to throw in that additional class, which will make it a little bit smaller than some of the other buildings, but we're still early. We still could see a lot of enrollments coming in between now and the start of school year.
And so with 3 teachers at University Park, it'd be 25 point
Correct.
enrollment.
Which would far exceed the others. And again, there's a lot of movement still from the end of this year over the summer, students in and out.
A lot of them haven't been enrolled yet.
Yeah, we'll continue to update these numbers as we meet.
What class size do you strive for?
K1 and 2, we try to keep it around 20, 21 or lower. Ideally, as we move up through the older grade levels, we've seen it increase to 23, 25 at times. So it all depends. And again, it's difficult to put a number on it because if we set the number at, say, 22, people move into the district, and by October, that number could grow to, say, 26.
Oh, no, I just wondered if you were.
Yeah, so then it's difficult to say, okay, let's split that class, and we would never want to recommend that because the
Your
kids have
4
been,
months in.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I just wondered what you kind of what your goal was to try to maintain. Thank you.
So, Dr. Short, is it true that the enrollment is increasing? It looks like the enrollment is going to be increasing for the next season.
It has been increasing, however, we're monitoring the kindergarten grade level for next year. We budgeted for 3 teachers in every building, but right now, in terms of previous years, the enrollment has been down for kindergarten. Now, we anticipate that to increase as we move through May, June, and July. So we'll continue to update everyone as we move forward.
All right, so you just answered my question. I said, does it seem like we're getting more students at the
Yes.
school? And you said, like,
Yes.
generally
Overall,
speaking, yes. And Paul, my question to you is, does it look like money's getting tighter and tighter? The answer is yes.
Definitely.
So,
Most certainly.
we, Monroeville and Pitcairn, we're in a pretty tight spot right now. If we come out of this poorly, people will find ways to move to other districts, and that's okay. If we come out of this well, if we do real well, then we can expect people to want to move into this area. So the burden is on us, the school board and the administration, to do pretty well over the next couple of years. And we have some folks that have just come in from the Monroeville Municipal Council, the mayor, the deputy mayor, and some other folks. And so we're about to have an intergovernmental committee meeting right after this to talk about these same things, not from just a school district perspective, but from the overall perspective.
Excellent.
All right, let's see if there's no other questions. Again, just as a quick summary, the next steps in the process we'll see at our May meetings, a proposed final budget, again, what we're required to pass, as well as the next time we'll be in this room will be Tuesday, June 7th, 6 o'clock, final public hearing. And again, what we saw this evening, that will change. I can guarantee you those numbers will be changing. We'll have updated numbers. Again, as we go through the entire next month and a half, there's a lot of changes that occur to the budget, both revenues, expenditures. Hopefully the revenues increase, expenditures decrease, but sometimes they go the other way. I mean, we see a little bit of everything, but overall, ideally, we want to get to obviously a balanced budget for that. So stay tuned. We've got a lot of work to do, and again, we'll report back to the board as we have more information.
Paul, one more thing. In order to keep the politics out of politics, it seems to me, colloquially speaking, that the budget shortfalls will have to come out of the taxpayer's pocket one way or another. That is, the state money comes out of our pocket, the federal money comes out of our pocket, the local money comes out of our pocket, and so it would be short-sighted just to say that the school district is raising taxes is the only bad guy in town. They're not. We're all in the same boat. I mean, state, local level, we're all trying our best to get through this difficult period. We may not be doing well. I understand that. We may be doing it as well as we can possibly do and still be doing poorly. That could be true, too. But we're in this together. Aren't we in this together?
It's true.
I think so.
It's true. All right. If there's nothing further, then we'll adjourn the meeting for this evening. Thank you, everyone.
Show a summary slide. You're going to show a summary slide.
Oh, do you know, as far as,
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't have anything. I kind of jumped to that one before we jumped over this. But again, these slides will be on the district's website. By all means, please, everyone go and take a look at the slides, and it's some great information for everyone to review.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you, Maiko.
Or you could print out that summary